السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وله بعد. Inshallah, today's topic is about Al-Imam Abu Dawud, one of the famous 6 scholars of Hadith that have authored a book that has become famous amongst, across the entire Muslim world. So perhaps you've heard a lot about Al-Bukhari and Muslim, rahimahum Allah. And the information about Al-Imam Abu Dawud might not be common knowledge. So inshallah today we'll cover his life, his work, the Sunan, and some gems we can extract from both. So his actual name is Sulaiman, ibn al-Ash'ath, ibn Ishaq, ibn Bashir, ibn Shaddad, ibn Amr, ibn Imran. And he is originally from a place called Sijistan, which you could say modern day Iran, Persia, Uzbekistan. And that's a fa'idah that the 6 scholars, Al-Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, An-Nasa'i, and Ibn Majah, none of them were originally Arab. They were actually originally non-Arab. And it's a fa'idah because it shows that Islam isn't linked to being Arab, and elevation or lofty ranks in Islam is not linked to that. Rather, it's linked to the tawfiq Allah Azza wa Jal gives to a believer. And they can obtain the highest ranks of Islamic scholarship, even if the Arabic language is not their mother tongue. So Abu Dawud as-Sijistani, it was said his great-grandfather is said to have fought with Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu and was killed in the Battle of Siffin. So there's some connection with the 4 khulafa here. He was born the year 202 after Hijri, and from a young age, he was keen to seek Islamic knowledge, and he traveled for it. He traveled to Baghdad in 220 after Hijri. So he's aged 18 years old. He travels all the way from Sijistan to Baghdad. Then he traveled from Baghdad to Ash-Sham, so modern day Syria, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, at the age of 20. And because he started seeking knowledge at such a young age, they say his isnad, his chain of narration, is ali, meaning between him and the Prophet ﷺ is only a very few people. When you compare 2 chains, and one is shorter than the other, you say for the shorter one, it's ali, and for the longer one, nazil, because it's longer. The gap, the tabaqat, the generations between that person and the Prophet ﷺ is more. So it's lower, it's nazil. So his sanad is ali. And because he started seeking knowledge at a young age, he surpasses Al-Imam Muslim in the length of his chains, because they are shorter than Al-Imam Muslim's chains, because he started younger. And this is why him and Al-Bukhari, rahimahullah, they share many of the same shuyukh. They share many of the same shuyukh because he started young. So imagine a modern day example is if there's a 40-year-old in the dars and a 15-year-old, and they're studying on the same teacher. The 15-year-old has that added advantage because he started younger. So he shares the same shuyukh as someone much more senior than him. We move on to his teachers. So Al-Imam Abu Dawud studied under many great scholars. And I'll mention the most famous of them. First of which is Al-Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. So Al-Imam Abu Dawud, like Al-Bukhari and Muslim, were direct students of Al-Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. Also from his teachers is Ali ibn al-Madini, who's a great scholar of Hadith in that time. Yahya ibn Ma'in, also another giant scholar. And Muhammad ibn Bashar. And Abu Dawud, rahimahullah, narrated 50,000 narrations from just Muhammad ibn Bashar. From just one sheikh, he memorized and learned 50,000 narrations. There is also a point of benefit we can take here. It is said Al-Imam Abu Dawud was from the earliest followers of the Hanbali school of fiqh, from the students, direct students of Al-Imam Ahmad, alongside Al-Imam Ahmad's 2 sons, Salih and Abdullah. So despite Al-Imam Abu Dawud being a giant scholar himself, despite that, he had the humility to still follow his teacher in understanding or obtaining the understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. And even though he himself is so knowledgeable, and he started seeking knowledge at such a young age, and he traveled and he learned and he memorized, he still had the humility to say, let me take my teacher's understanding, perhaps it is better than mine. So what about today? Today many people, they want to have direct access to the Quran and Sunnah, and they want to forego the scholarship that exists or has existed to help formulate our understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. So if Al-Imam Abu Dawud had the humility to still follow his teacher, then us today, when we are far less than him, should be humble enough to follow the scholar's understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah. Al-Imam Abu Dawud, 4 years before he passed away, he traveled to Basra. And the Amir there asked him for 3 favors. He said, number 1, he said, "Oh, Imam Abu Dawud, there is a fitna growing nearby in near Basra. So I want you to come and teach the people so that the people turn to the scholars and they are saved from this fitna." That's the first favor I want from you. The second favor is I want you to narrate your famous book, As-Sunan, to my children. And the third favor is I want you to organize a special class for my children because they don't mix with the common folk. They are special, they were raised maybe in the palaces. They don't sit with the commoners. So Al-Imam Abu Dawud said, "Tayyib. As for the first, I'm happy to do this." And this shows the benefit, how even the leaders of the Muslims knew, in order to save the people from a tribulation, we had to put scholars there so that people turn to the scholars and save themselves from the fitna. So today, one of the ways we can save ourselves from fitna is through knowledge and attaching to scholarship. Second, he didn't object to that either. He said, "I'll teach your children the Sunan." He said, "As for the third, there is no way for it. فَلَا سَبِيلَ إِلَيْهِ." He said, "There is no way I'll do this for you." What does this show? It shows he raised the rank of knowledge and glorified it and respected it. That no matter who asked him, he will not subjugate himself to anyone and humiliate the knowledge. Rather, he will make the knowledge lofty. And if you want to seek it, you come to the knowledge. Al-Imam Malik has a famous saying, knowledge is gone to and doesn't come. Meaning you have to go and make the effort to learn. Don't expect it to come to you. So even though the Amir of one of the great cities or towns of Islam made a special request, which is to organize a special class. It's not anything haram. Or just organize a special class, special dars, private lesson for my children. He said no, because this will degrade the value of Islamic knowledge. From his students are his son Abdullah, Al-Imam At-Tirmidhi, the author of Sunan At-Tirmidhi, Al-Imam An-Nasa'i, the author of Sunan Nasa'i, Al-Imam Ibn Abi Dunya, and Al-Imam Abu Awana. So as you can see, even amongst the 6 scholars of Hadith, there's a lot of connection with each other. Some teach others, some learn from others, just like the 4 Imams of fiqh. Like Imam Malik taught Al-Shafi'i, and Al-Shafi'i taught Al-Imam Ahmad, and even Abu Hanifa's students, Muhammad Hassan Al-Shaybani, had relationships with Imam Malik and Al-Shafi'i. There's a lot of connection, which shows a lot of the time we see a lot of difference when there is actually none. Yes, they have different opinions and different conclusions, but they saw themselves and they saw each other as brothers in Islam, and they learned and took from each other with no harm and no shame. So upon us is to recognize that one of the legacies of the scholars is that bond that they had with each other. They would teach and learn from each other. I'd like to just zoom in into his relationship with Al-Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. So he was considered from the major students of Al-Imam Ahmad, and a large number of his questions to Al-Imam Ahmad are recorded regarding 2 things. Number 1, al-jarh wa ta'dil, and number 2, fiqh rulings. Who knows what al-jarh wa ta'dil is? Yeah? Yeah, are they trustworthy? Are they strong in their memorization? What can we take from them? Is there anything doubt within them? So back then, Al-Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal didn't want his students to record, or he didn't write a book of fiqh. Like Shafi'i wrote, for example, Al-Risala. Ahmad didn't write a book of fiqh. What he did was, or what was recorded of him is his students would ask him questions and they would record the answer. So, and then that's how the fiqh and the hadith rulings were taken from him. So one of them is Su'alat Abu Dawud. So Abu Dawud asks a question, Muhammad answers, he records it, and it's recorded in Islamic history, and we receive it today. So from the two things he would learn from his teacher is about al-jarh wa ta'dil and fiqh rulings. He narrated from Al-Imam Ahmad 220 ahadith in his Sunan. 220 ahadith he narrates in his Sunan from the narration of Al-Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. And this is a big number if we consider that he narrated around 4,000 ahadith in his Sunan from around 300 mashaayikh. So you could say per shaykh 13, 14 ahadith, but with Al-Imam Ahmad, on average, but specifically with Al-Imam Ahmad, he did 400. He took 400 from Al-Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal directly. He also said, I have entered upon Abu Abdillah's house beyond count. Meaning I have visited Al-Imam Ahmad so many times to learn from him or to spend time with him, to share companionship beyond count. You can see they're very, very close. Then when he finished narrating and recording and compiling his Sunan, he read it upon Al-Imam Ahmad. And Al-Imam Ahmad liked it and was happy with it. He said, okay, now this can be something shared amongst the Muslims. He passed away in 275 after Hijrah in Al-Basra. So he lived for 73 Hijri years. Now we'll talk a bit about his Sunan. So the intention of his book, it's very important to understand why a scholar writes a book. Because some people say, oh, yes, we know Al-Bukhari and Muslim have all authentic hadith, if you exclude the mu'allaqat. But, Abu Dawud, I'm not sure if I can take from him. He might have some weak hadith. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he was weak. He's not as strong as Al-Bukhari and Muslim. So we make all these claims about the scholars. Even books that come later, we say, so-and-so scholar, he mentioned weak and fabricated hadith in his book, so we can't take from him. Before we decide upon whether we can take from a scholar or not, let's look at his methodology and introduction, like the points and the objective and the structure of his book, before we make a judgment. Because maybe he included these ahadith that are weak and fabricated for a specific reason. So that, for example, we don't fall into narrating from them or to highlight their weakness. So what did Imam Abu Dawud do? His intention was to gather the ahadith regarding rulings, al-ahkam. Not comprehensively gather the ahadith of all the abwab of the deen, like Al-Bukhari and Muslim and At-Tirmidhi did. So his goal was not to gather ahadith, for example, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, on Al-Iman, on the Quran, unless there was some ruling related to it. You could say it's almost like a book of fiqh in a way. It's a hadith related to fiqh. Secondly, he also wanted to keep it concise. So he will not mention the entire hadith if it was long. Meaning he will mention the portion he wants you to know from that big hadith. He focused on the authentic hadith. However, if there was no authentic hadith regarding a particular mas'ala or issue, he would bring in hadith that are weaker. So that's part of his methodology. And so the scholars say, perhaps he's following his teacher, Al-Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, because he's narrated from Al-Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. He said, if I can't find an authentic hadith on an issue, I would rather share a weak hadith than my own opinion, because I value the hadith more than my own opinion. Because if you think about it, what does weak hadith mean? It means we are not certain whether the Prophet said it or not. It doesn't mean we have to throw it under the bus straight away. It just means we are not fully certain. It could be, it could not be. With Sahih, we know for certain the Prophet said it. For weak, we're not sure. So I'd rather have that not sure possibility than my own opinion, than my own ra'i. So Al-Imam Abu Dawud followed that methodology. Each chapter in his book does not have many ahadith. At times, only one or two. So he will list a chapter, bab, kada wa kada, and he will mention only one or two ahadith. In addition to that, if he mentioned weak ahadith, they were well-known narrations and not strange or unknown to the scholars. Meaning he will mention them, but he knows it's weak, and he knows his colleagues know it's weak. That makes sense. Because he knows they're all skilled professionals. So he knows that they are aware this is weak. But it's upon us as laymen to learn to know that is weak. So sometimes we will come across and we're like, how could Abu Dawud put this in his Sunan? But for him, it's an easy matter. He said, people know it's weak. So it's important, and then the scholars divide ahadith into what they call ahadith that are mashhur, famous. So when I say famous, it's not a grading on its authenticity or its weakness. It just means it's well known. And mashhur has another meaning, but in this scenario, it means well known. And there's ahadith called gharaib, strange ahadith that are not known. And the scholars of hadith would give a lot of importance to the mashhur, what's well known. And if you bring in gharaib, if you bring in strange, unknown ahadith, they didn't like it. Because why would you bring gharaib? To draw attention to yourself. Oh, no one else knows this fancy hadith that if Al-Bukhari, Muslim, all of them missed it, and I've come with this nice story, people will turn to me and want to narrate from me. So al-gharaib sounds exciting. It's got that aspect of uniqueness in it. And this will be something that they did not like. They said, no, you bring the mashhur, you bring what's well known. They will judge and test its chains against other chains and its authenticity. Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, he says the types of hadith in Abu Dawud's book can be divided into three. Number one, what is as-sahih and close to it, meaning al-hasan. Number two, what is weak and the weakness is severe. When this is the case, Abu Dawud rahimahullah would mention explicitly that it is weak, and he will tell you why. He said this narrator is like this, for example. There's a discontinuation in the chain. The third category is in between. It is weak, but the weakness is not severe, and he would remain silent about it. Now, in the science of hadith, there are two types of hadith. Again, another division. The salih lil-ihtijaj and salih lil-i'tibar. What's the meaning of these two? Salih lil-ihtijaj means this hadith can be used as an evidence in the deen. Okay? So that's sahih and hasan. Then there's salih lil-i'tibar, meaning this hadith is weak. They know it's weak. But perhaps if we can put together a few of these weak hadith, it might raise it to what we call hasan li ghayrihi. It might raise its level. So we're not going to discard this hadith. We're going to keep it in our collections in case someone later comes and puts the pieces together and can raise the totality of these narrations to hasan li ghayrihi. They call it salih lil-i'tibar. Like we consider it. That's what i'tibar means. It's considered. So Al-Imam Ahmad has a famous saying. He says that weak hadith, one day it might be needed. One day you could need this weak hadith. Why? Because you could put it together with other weak hadith and it could raise the general level to hasan. But munkar is always munkar. I mean, rejected hadith is always rejected. We don't need to use it. It can never ever be put together with others to raise its rank. It's too weak. But the things that have little bit of weakness, ahadith that have little bit of weakness, can be put together and raised as we call hasan li ghayrihi and so on. Last but not least, the number of ahadith in his book are just over 4,000. So as you can see, we took a few important lessons from the brief story of Al-Imam Abu Dawud. So first of which is that knowledge is tawfiq and blessing from Allah. It doesn't matter what your background is, whether Arabic is your first language or not. If you're sincere and you strive, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant it to you. Number two, seeking knowledge at a young age. And that gave him an upper hand over his colleagues, his peers, his classmates, because the length of the chain between himself and the Prophet ﷺ was short. Number three, his respect and venerance for his teachers. Even though he was such a great scholar, he still followed his teachers' fiqh opinions. Number four, if I've lost count, his respect for knowledge itself. When the Emir of Basra asked him, can you do a special class for my children because they don't mix with the common folk? He said, as for this, no way. No way I can organize this. Meaning, if they want to seek knowledge, they have to come to the dars itself. Then his relationship with his teachers, we spoke about that. Specifically, Al-Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. His relationship with his students, and from them is his son, Abdullah, Al-Imam al-Tirmidhi, Al-Imam al-Nasa'i. And we spoke about how close he was with Al-Imam Ahmad. He visited him so many times beyond count. And he read the Sunan upon him to get his approval for it. And we spoke about his Sunan. How yes, there could be some weak ahadith in it. But if there are weak ahadith, it's salih lil-i'tibar. It can be utilized with other ahadith. And if it's weak, if it's very weak, he will mention that it is very weak. He'll clarify it and explain it to you. So as you can see, every hadith in his book, there's intentionality behind it. It's not just, it looked nice, so he put it in. No, these are great scholars we're talking about. They have memorized more hadith in their minds than we've probably ever read in our lives, in our lifetime. These are giants. So always we must remember, if we find something that a scholar's done that doesn't maybe make sense, doesn't appeal to our logic, we should give them the benefit of the doubt and say they must have a reason for it. They're not infallible. I'm not saying they're infallible. The Prophet is infallible, but let's at least hear out or research or look into what is their reason for doing this action. What is their reason? Give them that opportunity. Okay, they could make a mistake. It happens, they're human beings. But at the end of the day, they are human beings, but they're also immense scholars. They're not humans being like us. They're a far higher level of human being. So we must give the scholars the benefit of the doubt and look into why they did a certain action, and hope that inshallah, from this talk you're able to appreciate one of the great scholars of Islam, Al-Imam Abu Dawud Sijistani rahimahullah. Subhanahu wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.